that, do you have a copy on you?
Which one? I don't have any copies on me today, but
Game Salad?
Game Salad, I do not have a copy with me.
I've got like 4 prototypes on my iPad made with that game right now.
Nice. This text is a game design text as opposed to programming or how to use Game Salad text. But I will if you drop me an email, I can send you a copy.
Alright.
Yeah.
What would you say would be good things to learn if your end goal is to be project management for video games?
So for project management, one of the most important things that project management does is time management. I would recommend, if not spending time as an artist or a programmer, spend time working with them so you can get a good sense of how long it takes to program this type of thing, or how long it takes to create this type of art asset. Because that, I think, is that's the most important thing that they do, and it's also where things can go horribly, horribly wrong. Because at the end of the day, honestly, we're all guessing as to how long something's going to take. If you go to your artist and say, "Hey, I need 25 bobbleheads. How long is that going to take you?" And they're thinking, "Well, okay, if I do it with this kind of art style, and I use this piece of software, and I'm on vacation for 2 weeks, I can have it done in 2 weeks, right?" And then they get pneumonia.
Yeah.
Or it comes back from the higher ups that we're no longer going to be using voxels. We're going to be using vectors, right? And so the time management is not only figuring out how long it takes to create a certain type of asset, it's also building in extra time to account for these kinds of problems. And many small studios will cut that time as short as possible, right? You're facing down Trip Hawkins, who is telling you, "I need this game in 2 weeks." And in the back of your head, you're like, "I need 6 weeks to complete this game." But you're standing across the table from Trip Hawkins and he's holding a check out. And you're like, "All right, 2 weeks, we're good to go." Right? So you don't want, so you want to have an idea, an honest idea. And if somebody is offering you money to do something in like way too short a time, you can tell them to piss off. Honestly. And say, "You know what, that's not enough time to go."
Can you build me the next Angry Birds in about a week?
Well, because what happens is when people are hiring you, they want to get you cheaper and they want to get you to work faster than anybody else. So you have to follow Mr. Scott's rule of engineering, right? You always double the time that it takes to do anything. If it's going to take, if your artist says, "That's going to take me 8 days to build that asset," you go back up the line and say it's going to take 16 days, because first of all they're going to negotiate you down to like 12, right? But second of all, you know that 8 days is an ideal situation, right? Because nobody ever pitches for a bad situation. Nobody ever thinks, "Well, what if I break my leg skiing in the middle of this?" Or what if somebody runs over my car with a tank? And the thing is, these kind of weird things happen. We're in crunch mode right now for GDC, and my Facebook feed is full of the weirdest disasters I have ever seen. One of the studios I used to work for has a raccoon in their server farm. And it's all happening because GDC starts in 4 days. This is when the weird stuff comes out of the woodwork. The thing is that the years that it doesn't happen, you don't notice because you're so happy that nothing happened and didn't notice. But then every so often we have these things happen, and you're like, how the heck is this? Is this coming out of the woodwork? When I worked for Starsphere, at like 11 o'clock one night, I get an emergency phone call from the CEO. Apparently, the restaurant underneath the studio was on fire. So all of our stuff is, all of our computers, all of our gear is up there. And so we're all online pulling backups as fast as we possibly can, because the tape drives are in there too, and like everything is and fortunately, they put out the fire before it got to all of our gear. But, this kind of stuff, will throw your production schedule. And then when you go back to THQ and say, "I'm sorry, there's a raccoon in our server farms," you're like, "Well, we're really sorry about that, but that's going to cost you 15% off your next payment because you missed a milestone." Right? There is no wiggle room on their end. You set your milestones, you meet your milestones, you miss your milestones, tough. Right? They're not going to fiddle that for you. unless you've already produced, you know, BioShock or something of equivalent rock star power. Yes.
When you made the transition from art to code,
Mm-hmm.
did you have people in your life say like, why are you giving up on your dreams? Or are you giving up, like,
Oh yeah.
how did you respond to that? I find it baffling and I'm dealing with that now.
It's, you know, there's, the way I always pitched it was, it's, you know, it's the same dream, it's just a different door,
Ah,
right?
I like that.
It's, you know, the people who say things like that are usually people who are not in games, right? Or who are not in your field in general. They don't understand that you can still arrive at the end goal, right? I mean, the end goal for almost all of us is to be game developers. Whether we are programmers, whether we are artists, whether we are audio, right? Whether we are production. Being a game developer and being part of a game that is produced and put out into the world is the goal. That is the dream, right? It's not necessarily spending 24 hours on a ramen-filled coding binge trying to get this thing done. That's not the dream. That's just the method by which we get there. And so when I ran it, and I absolutely ran into that. I'm like, you know, people are like, oh my God, you already have, you know, a college degree. Why are you learning to program, right? And I'm like, well, because that's what I need to do to make this happen. That's the next step I needed to take. And so, you know, it won't necessarily stop them, but
No,
it
but
does
having a
help.
catchphrase, same dream, different door, I
Yeah.
mean, bam.
There you go.
That's
You can
great.
drop it and walk on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it sounds like with your business model of having such a decentralized kind of team organization, that like a huge emphasis on networking is probably like a super important thing.
Mhm.
Do you have any like horror stories about just a really bad like relationship that happened to have that decentralized nature? Like,
We did, you know, we made a mistake once upon a time, and so when you go out and you hunt for new contractors, a lot of times what you'll get responses from other teams that, you know, are looking to pick up, and they treat this as you are a publisher and we want you to pay us to make your entire product. And so we had negotiated with the team so that they would handle a portion of the product and we would handle the other portion of the product. But it ultimately did not work out. They held assets hostage. And they said, well, you know, we think we need to renegotiate because this is more work than we expected. We're going to hold on to those assets and not let you have them until we've renegotiated, right? And so it became a very fractious relationship. And ultimately, we just let them go. You know, there was no... They had their own team, they had their own culture and their own process, which didn't mesh with the way that we were doing things. We thought it would be great, right? Okay, we've got a team. This is, you know, 3 people. They have worked together on 2 or 3 games. They should know each other by now. They know who gets pissed off when you slurp your coffee. They know, you know, how everybody works together. But the truth of the matter is that wasn't what we ran into, right? It became problematic, and we had to call it off. It took probably 6 months out of our development time on that project, which was not good at all. Yes.
When you were making the transition from art and working on art to code and such, did you ever find occasions where you probably, say for example, like I myself paid for a 10-week training course in Maya because I didn't know the tools. Would you ever find that resourceful, or did you ever think of going back to college and stuff like that, or learning more art skills, or like filling in those gaps?
I've found that the gaps are usually there for a reason. I tend to end up revisiting certain processes and certain types of code repeatedly. I need to use translations. I need to use lerps. I need to be able to cause integers to cross over from this script to that script and then call something on a third script over here. So for building demos and the type of coding that I do, I don't need that depth of knowledge. I've considered going back and getting it, but, you know, up until now, you know, my art degree and now all of my programming skills, and to a certain extent my CEO training, such as it is, has all been going out and finding people who know the thing I need to know and talking to that person. So I'm reverse engineering, you know, what I do, really. And I do the same thing for business development as well, because I find that you don't need to know all of those things. It might be good if you did, but for me personally, knowing this specific piece here, it's the Sherlock Holmes model, right? I don't need to know that the Earth goes around the sun. That doesn't come into play with the things that I'm building right now. I don't need to know how to talk to an SQL server in China because that's not part of the types of products that I might build. So while I've considered it, I've usually put it aside. Yes.
What kind of contracts do you have for your core team? And what do you use for your freelancers?
So the core team are all on an equity basis. So we're all co-owners at different levels. And then on top of that, we use a stipend for the core team. So there's X amount per month when we're on contract. If we're not on contract, then the core team doesn't get paid. Most of us have day jobs. I still do contract work on the side. My IP wrangler works down in Hollywood, so he still does script writing as part of his day job. So so when we're not on the clock for Bushi-go, then nobody gets anything. For the individual contractors, those are pretty standard contract. We do try to do hourly contracts as opposed to per project. When we started, we had to do per project because we didn't know how long things would take to build. Now that we've done this for a while, and this feeds back into the project management class, now that we've done this for a while, we know how long it takes for things to do, and so we can say, I need this code built. It's probably going to take 40 hours to get this code written, and so we can account for that, so we have a good idea that we're not just going to be writing checks for months at a time. But if it's something brand new and we've never done before, then we're going to look at it on a per project basis.
Yeah, you said you focus on narrative building for your mobile games, which kudos to because I feel like that's severely lacking in the mobile market. How do you feel about that? Because it seems like the mobile market right now is really dominated with just you can play this for 5 minutes kind of games and cash grab kind of games, pay to win. And for every game that comes out, there's 20 cheap knockoffs that are poorly designed.
Yep.
How do you feel like that's going to progress? And also, it seems like sometimes with the move to smartphones and no real dedicated physical interface for gaming, how that's holding that back.
So for narrative games are actually a better fit for mobile, I think, than they are for PC or even for console. Partly because enough people are now reading on things like the Kindle and they're reading on tablets and phones that spending a long time staring at the screen to get a story component is more natural to people. I mean, I know a lot of people who read ebooks, right? But almost nobody reads ebooks on a big screen like this, right? Most people read it on their tablet or they read it on their Kindle. So for narrative games, I actually think that mobile's a better fit. There's a couple of problems we run into. Number one, it's a blue ocean for narrative games. There's not many of them out there. Most of them get through a couple of episodes and then they fail. We had this happen with Agilis, which was our first game. The thing that we found is for the narrative stuff, you don't necessarily go after a gamer market. The narrative stuff tends to appeal to casual game players, but it also appeals to readers. You are looking at people who are comic book fans. You are looking at people who attend, science fiction conventions. You are looking at people for whom narrative is the thing. And so for us, that's been predominantly an interface shift in how you interact with the story, and it's been a marketing shift. So for example, we're going to be at Silicon Valley Comic Con at the end of the year. So as opposed to trying to get to the Angry Birds players, we're going after the people we know are going to connect with the narrative better and more quickly than somebody who's interested in a big red button game. Narrative is slower, right? You don't get the hockey stick for games unless you're Telltale and you're working with Game of Thrones or you're working with Walking Dead, which is an entirely different machine. So narrative games have to be built slowly and they have to be built over time, which most people don't like to do in mobile. People want to see your game come out, they want to see you release it on a Thursday, and then by Sunday they want to see 100,000 downloads. right? I mean, that's what they're looking for. That right there is the hallmark of a hit game, so,
Kinda like that.
yeah.
It's like interactive Edgar Allan Poe. I just
Sure.
read a story with my wife every night before bed.
That's absolutely
Yeah,
one
just
way to do it.
Flip the pages and it's got,
Yeah. And you get a bit of an interactive component, and you get the storytelling component as well.
Yeah.
Yes, you've been very patient.
I was just wondering, especially if you're not going for a business degree, how one might go about getting like some business skills or understanding that.
So, there's a couple different components that go into business. The first one is you have to be willing to sell. And you can learn to sell anywhere, right? I mean, pick up a telemarketing job for one summer and learn how to keep people on the phone. And you're not gonna make any money doing it, and it's kinda gonna suck, but you're gonna learn how to engage people, and you're gonna learn how to hold that no off as long as possible, right? And maybe even turn it into a yes. So in my case, when I was working in the brokerage industry during one of those gaps in my backstory, that was where I got my business experience. That was, learning sales, essentially. Learning how to put together a package and then learning how to promote that package to people. The nuts and bolts part of business, portions of it you can learn as you go. Portions of it, they're out there, right? I mean, you can go online and you can, for example, I have contractors, so I work with Intuit to handle my payroll stuff. And they ping me, and they say, hey, you have to get your 1099s out to your contractors before the end of the month, boom. And so those types of systems are out there that will walk you through that component as well. And then if you get deeper into business, it's really hard to do all the business stuff yourself and be an expert in everything, right? You want to bring on an accountant at some point. If you have an accountant who is experienced in games, then they'll understand all of the cool stuff you can do with your finances to keep your team alive as long as possible, right? They'll understand how to float cash in this account versus that account and how to make sure that people pay their invoices within 30 days or less. Always make your invoices 30 days, by the way. If you're working as a contractor, the big studios will push them out to 90 days, and you need to put a red line through that and send it back and say, I'm sorry, it's gotta be 30 days or we're not doing this. Most of the time, they don't care. Most of the time, if they can get the 90 days, they'll get it. But if you say 30 days, then they'll redline it and fix it for you. So that's just one of those things that's sort of automatically written in that they want you to work with. If you have a chance to internship with a game studio, sometimes you can target that internship. You say, I want to be in management. Can I be the assistant for this producer, or can I work with the biz dev team over here? So if you're not going to go, for an MBA or a business degree, then getting the hands-on experience somehow, is better. I mean, it could be simple, something as simple as opening an Etsy store and figuring out what you need to do and what you don't need to do, and then taking that and translating it. My first business was selling limes. I used to go around all the houses, kind of out in the boondocks. Everybody had lime groves. I would collect them and sell them to restaurants. I figured out that there was a big company doing it for $50 a bag, and I could go pick it myself and sell it for $40 a bag. And everybody likes to save money, so but that was where my business experience, such as it was, started. So it can be built upon. And if you, in the games industry in particular, there are always people who are happy to be advisors. Now, I will point out, in California, advisors cannot be compensated. You are not supposed to give advisors equity. That is a no-no. You are not supposed to pay advisors. They are supposed to be advising you because you have convinced them that you are awesome. There's actually rules in place in California where if you're paying your advisors with equity, you can get into some trouble doing that. So, you can definitely talk to people, and people love to share their specialized knowledge, really. So you can almost definitely find someone who will help you out. Yes?
With your contractors and stuff like that, you said that through a game development degree, you kind of spider out in those ways and develop different skill sets.
Mhm.
But at least right now, what do you look for in your skill sets beyond personality that actually meshes with your team's actual skills?
So for what we're doing now, I look for prior project experience. It doesn't have to be game dev experience, and it doesn't have to be employed game dev experience. If you have produced a project and can say, I did this within X amount of time with X amount of resources, I will definitely take a serious look. Obviously, you know, if you've worked on AAA, I'm probably going to take you a little less seriously than if you've worked in mobile, because the timelines are so different and the requirements are so different. So somebody who has produced for mobile, definitely. Somebody who codes in C#. If I bring on a rookie, then they have to be willing to learn to code in C#, because we do everything in C#.
Oh, you're an Unity.
Yeah.
So
So that's, yeah, it's easier for us.
C#
and it's-
or JavaScript.
Right, and C# for us has always been more robust than JavaScript. So I would have to say in order of importance, programming language, experience gathered, so whether or not it's formal or not. Actually, it's bonus points if you've produced a game on your own, or you've developed a game on your own, or gotten like 5 people together in your garage, because that shows me that you have discipline, that you have the discipline to do what we need to do. Studio experience for us is not required. I know a lot of places like to see it, but because of the nature of what we do and the way we do it, if you have the discipline to produce the work, then you have the discipline to produce the work. And I do find that people, both artists and programmers, if they get out of a formal employment situation, there's a period of time where everything just flops, right? Where you have to learn to get up at 7 in the morning, have your breakfast, and sit down and produce without somebody sitting over your shoulder. And you know, you go through college, and there is somebody sitting over your shoulder the whole time, right? I mean, it's your instructor, and it's a very light hand, but there is a accountability there. So somebody who has proven to be able to work on their own is definitely, I think, a plus in that case as well. So.
Artist skills?
For artist skills, portfolio is first. The quality of the art. If the art fits what we need is a really big one. So there's this thing that we used to say at Art Center. You know, if a producer needs to make the next version of Burger Time, and he looks at 100 different portfolios of varying levels, he will pick the artist who has a picture of a hamburger in their portfolio. If you have a picture of a hot dog, even if it's a better picture than the hamburger, they're still going to pick the hamburger, right? Because that is what they need at that point. Most producers will not. So when you go through art school, you learn to copy other art styles, right? You learn to work like Kandinsky, or you learn to work like Michelangelo, or you learn to be able to replicate these different visual looks. But generally speaking, it's presumed that what ends up in your portfolio is what makes you happy. So we're not going to hire you, even if your work is excellent, if the visual style or the visual content doesn't fit the game that we have in mind at that moment, then we'll regard it as not being a fit. And I've I've made the attempt more than once to hire an artist and then bring them over to a different art style. And usually what happens is it makes the artist unhappy and it makes the producer unhappy, and then the end result is somewhere in between. So portfolio is the absolute number one. So look and feel relevance to the game that we're developing. And if we don't have a look and feel yet, then we will judge it based on quality. Relevant skills. So if we need an animator, we're going to look for animations. If we need a concept artist, we're going to look for concept art. It's okay to have multiple things in your portfolio, particularly if you're just starting out. Because that's what happens when you're just starting out. You do a few concept pieces, you do a few animations, you do a couple of 3D models. And so we expect, if you've got that breadth in your portfolio, then you're new to the scene. We look for experience in games. Again, does not have to be studio experience. Studio experience is a bonus. Freelance experience is better. game experience for artists is especially important because in order to get art assets into the game, you have to understand things like transparency levels. And you have to understand that, you know, if you palletize something to 257 colors, then that first pixel is going to be your transparency color. And if you happen to have that pixel being black, your ninja is gonna come out looking like a red face mask and a couple of fancy shoes. And so somebody who has already beaten their heads against a game engine is I think going to be key in what we look for, so.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but,
Okay.
any words, last words?
Well, I mean, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer questions and definitely do what I can to help out. And that's about it.